Park Tae-ho sat on his porch watching the sunset, paint the sky orange and pink over the quiet Busan suburb he called home. At 62, the retired Air Force colonel had found peace in simple routines after decades of military service. His golden retriever Bomi lay at his feet, her tail thumping gently against the wooden deck. "Ready for our walk, girl?" Tae-ho asked, reaching for the worn leather leash hanging by the door. Bomi jumped up instantly, her whole body wiggling with excitement. These evening walks had become sacred to both of them, a daily ritual that had helped Tae-ho cope after losing his wife Mija to cancer 3 years ago. The neighborhood streets were quiet as they made their way toward the small nature park at the end of the block. Tae-ho's neighbors waved from their gardens or front windows, familiar with the pair's nightly routine. Old Mrs. Yang called out from her vegetable patch, "Beautiful night for a walk, Tae-ho." He nodded and smiled. These small connections meant everything to him now. After retiring from service, he'd struggled with purpose and the lingering effects of what he'd seen in combat. The nightmares had come regularly until Bomi entered his life, a scraggly rescue pup who somehow knew exactly when to nudge him awake from bad dreams or rest her head on his knee during difficult days. "You saved me. You know that?" Tae-ho murmured to the dog as they entered the park. He unclipped her leash in the empty field, allowing her to bound ahead while he followed along the familiar path. The stars were exceptionally bright tonight, twinkling against the darkening sky with unusual clarity. That's when he noticed something odd, a patch of stars vanishing and reappearing as if something massive but invisible was moving across the sky. Tae-ho squinted upward, his military training kicking in. Whatever it was, it didn't match any aircraft pattern he recognized. Bomi had stopped running and stood alert in the middle of the field, her ears perked forward as she stared at the same spot in the sky. Then she began barking. Not her usual playful bark, but something urgent and protective. "Bomi, come," Tae-ho called, suddenly uneasy. Something about the situation felt wrong, raising the hairs on the back of his neck. The dog ignored his command, a rare occurrence that only heightened his concern. Instead, she continued barking at the sky, which now seemed to shimmer in an unnatural way. Tae-ho started jogging toward her just as a beam of light suddenly appeared, illuminating Bomi in an eerie blue glow. The air around them hummed with energy, and for the first time, Tae-ho could make out the outline of something massive hovering above, curved and metallic with strange symbols etched across its surface. His military experience told him this was no experimental aircraft or drone. This was something entirely unknown. "Bomi, come here now," he shouted, breaking into a full run. Bomi finally turned toward him, her eyes reflecting the strange blue light. She took 2 steps in his direction before freezing. The humming intensified to a painful pitch, and the beam surrounding her brightened, until Tae-ho had to shield his eyes. When he looked again, his heart stopped. Where Bomi had stood just seconds before was nothing, just a small, scorched circle in the grass. His beloved companion had simply vanished. "No." The cry tore from his throat as he reached the spot. "Bomi!" Above, the distortion in the air shifted. Whatever had been there was moving away, becoming completely invisible again except for the slight ripple effect against the stars. Within seconds, there was no evidence anything unusual had happened, except for the empty, burned circle of grass, and Bomi's collar lying in the center. Tae-ho fell to his knees, picking up the collar with trembling hands. 20 years of military training hadn't prepared him for this. He'd seen combat, witnessed destruction, but this made no sense. His mind struggled to process what his eyes had seen. A dog walker entered the park and noticed Tae-ho kneeling. Alone. "Colonel Park? Are you okay? Where's Bomi?" Tae-ho looked up, his face ashen. "They took her. They just took her." "Who took her?" The neighbor approached cautiously, concerned by Tae-ho's distress. Tae-ho pointed to the sky, knowing how it would sound but unable to lie about what he'd witnessed. "Something up there. Not a plane, not a helicopter. Something else." That night, Tae-ho couldn't sleep. He sat at his kitchen table with Bomi's collar in his hands, replaying the event over and over. When morning came, he made 2 calls, first to his old commanding officer, then to the local news. He knew the military would dismiss his claims, maybe even suggest he was experiencing PTSD episodes. The news might label him a crackpot, but Tae-ho knew what he had seen. And unknown to him as he made those calls, 3 separate astronomical observatories had detected an anomalous object entering Earth's atmosphere the previous evening, right over Busan. By noon, security camera footage from a nearby building would surface, showing a distant but clear image of Bomi disappearing in a flash of light. What the visitors could not have known was that they hadn't just taken any dog. They had taken the beloved companion of a retired military strategist with connections throughout global defense networks. More importantly, they had taken the star of a popular social media account with over 2 million followers who had fallen in love with the story of a broken soldier and the rescued dog who healed him. And in one careless moment, these aliens had made the worst possible first impression on humanity. The shaky video clip of Bomi's disappearance went viral within hours. At first, people argued about whether it was real or an elaborate hoax. Expert after expert appeared on news channels, offering explanations from secret military tests to digital manipulation. But when 3 separate observatories confirmed unusual activity in Earth's atmosphere that night, the conversation shifted dramatically. Tae-ho's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters camped outside his modest home, hoping for interviews. Government officials arrived in unmarked cars. His neighbor, Mrs. Yang, brought homemade kimchi and stood guard on his porch, shooing away the more aggressive journalists. "They don't understand," Tae-ho told her quietly as they sat drinking tea in his kitchen. "This isn't about aliens or UFOs or whatever they're calling it. This is about Bomi." On the refrigerator behind him, photos of the golden retriever covered nearly every inch. Bomi in the snow, Bomi with a stick twice her size, Bomi sleeping on Tae-ho's chest. Each image represented a moment when the dog had pulled him back from darkness after losing his wife. The social media account he'd started, Healing Hikes with Bomi, had begun as therapy suggested by his doctor. "Take pictures of positive moments," the doctor had said. "Focus on the good things." No one had expected those simple photos and captions to resonate with millions worldwide. Within days of the incident, Bomi's followers organized vigils in parks across the globe. In London, Seoul, New York, and hundreds of other cities, people gathered with their own dogs, holding up pictures of Bomi printed from Tae-ho's account. The hashtag, Justice for Bomi, trended worldwide for 9 straight days. "Have you seen this?" Officer Kang asked, showing Tae-ho his phone during one of his daily check-ins. The young police officer had been assigned to handle security around Tae-ho's home after threats from people who believed he was hiding information. On the screen was a satellite image of a park in Brazil where thousands of people and their dogs had arranged themselves to form a giant image of Bomi's face visible from space. "They didn't even know her," Tae-ho whispered, his voice breaking. "Why do they care so much?" "Because she represented something pure," Mrs. Yang said, refilling his tea. "In a complicated world, she made people happy just by being herself." While the public mourned, world leaders gathered in an emergency United Nations session. For the HFY, first time in decades, countries that typically opposed each other found themselves aligned by a common threat. The meeting was initially called to address potential security concerns, but it quickly transformed into something unexpected. "This isn't just an incursion into our airspace," the South Korean representative stated. "This was the taking of an innocent life that millions had come to care about. We demand answers and accountability." Remarkably, even countries with tense diplomatic relationships nodded in agreement. Back in Busan, Tae-ho received an unexpected visitor. Dr. Lee Soo-jin, head of the newly formed International Extraterrestrial Contact Division, arrived without fanfare or press. "Colonel Park," she said, bowing slightly as he opened the door. "I need your help." In his living room, Dr. Lee explained that multiple attempts to establish communication with the alien vessel had failed. The craft had moved to the far side of the moon, just out of reach of direct signals. "Why me?" Tae-ho asked. "I'm retired. I was just a tactical officer." Dr. Lee pulled out a tablet and showed him footage from all over the world. The vigils, the memorials, people sharing stories of how Bomi's adventures had helped them through difficult times. "Because the world trusts you," she said simply, "and because you understand what we've lost better than anyone." That evening, Tejo found himself in front of cameras for the first time. The broadcast would be transmitted globally and, through newly adjusted deep space antennas toward the alien craft. He spoke not of revenge or war, but of Bomi. How she'd saved him from despair after losing his wife. How she greeted every morning with enthusiasm regardless of weather or circumstance. How she'd sit with neighborhood children who came to read books to her. "She was just a dog to you," he said, addressing the unknown visitors directly. "But to us, she was family. If you can understand anything about us, try to understand that." The broadcast ended with a simple request: return to open communication. "No," response came. Days turned into weeks. Scientists detected the alien craft moving from the moon, heading outward through the solar system. Attempts at contact continued to fail. Military forces worldwide were placed on high alert, though everyone recognized the futility of conventional weapons against visitors with such advanced technology. Then something unexpected happened. People around the world began sending their personal stories to Tejo, tales of how their pets had saved them during dark times, stories of bonds that transcended words. The messages arrived by the thousands, then millions. "They're not just supporting you," Dr. Lee told him as they reviewed the global response. "They're making a statement about who we are as a species." World leaders took notice. In an unprecedented move, the UN Security Council unanimously passed a resolution declaring the taking of Bomi an act of aggression against Earth itself. But more importantly, they authorized the activation of a project so secret that even most heads of state hadn't known of its existence until that moment. Colonel Park, the South Korean president, said during a private call, "We need you in Antarctica by tomorrow." "Antarctica?" Tejo questioned. "What's in Antarctica?" "Our response," came the reply. "Something we built hoping we'd never need to use it." As Tejo packed a small bag, he placed Bomi's collar carefully in his pocket. The world wasn't just grieving a dog anymore. They were uniting around what she represented, the capacity for love and connection that defined humanity at its best. And now they were preparing to defend it. The military transport plane landed on a hidden runway carved into the Antarctic. Tejo stepped out into biting cold that stole his breath away. 4 other passengers disembarked behind him, scientists and military officials from different countries, all looking equally confused about why they'd been summoned. "This way, Colonel Park," said a woman in a white parka, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. She introduced herself as Dr. Kim Ji-woo, head of Project Leviathan. "We have little time. The visitors have left our solar system, but they're moving slower than expected. This may be our only chance." They boarded a sleek elevator hidden inside what appeared to be an ordinary research station. As they descended, Tejo felt the temperature rise. The elevator plunged deeper than seemed possible, the digital floor indicator passing 100, then 200, then 300 meters. "How long has this been here?" asked Tejo, clutching the handrail as the elevator continued its descent. "Construction began in 1962, Dr. Kim replied. "After the Cuban Missile Crisis, several nations realized we needed protection from threats beyond our own making. The elevator finally stopped at 1,200 meters. When the doors opened, Tejo's jaw dropped. They stood on a platform overlooking an enormous underground cavern. The space was so vast it had its own weather system, with small clouds forming near the distant ceiling. But what caught Tejo's attention was the colossal structure in the center, a ship unlike anything he'd ever seen. "That's Leviathan," he whispered. The vessel stretched nearly a kilometer in length, its hull sleek and dark. Unlike conventional ships, it had no visible windows, just smooth surfaces broken occasionally by strange patterns that seemed to shift color as he watched. 30 countries contributed to its creation, Dr. Kim explained as they walked toward a transport pod that would take them closer. Even during the Cold War, this project continued in secret. The technology came from various sources. some of it reverse-engineered from a crashed alien vessel found in 1947. Roswell, another passenger murmured. Dr. Kim nodded. Among others, we've recovered 9 different extraterrestrial crafts over the past century. Each taught us something new. As they approached the massive ship, Tae-ho noticed hundreds of workers swarming around it like ants, removing protective coverings and running diagnostics. The vessel hummed with energy, making the air vibrate. Why me? Tae-ho finally asked the question that had been bothering him since he'd received the call. I was just a tactical officer. I've never even seen this technology before. Dr. Kim stopped, walking, and turned to face him. Her expression softened. Because you understand what we lost. This isn't just about showing force, it's about making contact the right way. She led them through a series of security checkpoints into the heart of the ship. The interior was surprisingly warm and organic-looking, with corridors that curved gently and lighting that adjusted automatically to their presence. The command center, Dr. Kim announced as they entered a circular room filled with technology that looked decades ahead of anything Tae-ho had seen in his military career. A young officer stood from the central chair. Commander Lee Sun-ho, he introduced himself with a bow. We've been expecting you, Colonel Park. The next few hours passed in a blur of briefings and introductions. The crew of Leviathan consisted of 120 specialists from 24 countries, all chosen for their expertise and psychological resilience. Most had been training for years on simulators, preparing for a day they hoped would never come. The ship uses a propulsion system we still don't fully understand, explained Chief Engineer Patel as he showed Tae-ho around the engine room. It creates a bubble of space-time that allows us to move at speeds that should be impossible. And weapons? Tae-ho asked quietly. Defensive only, Patel assured him. Energy shields, disruption beams that can disable systems without destruction, and a communication array powerful enough to broadcast through nearly any interference. That evening, as the crew made final preparations, Tae-ho sat alone in his assigned quarters, turning Bomi's collar over in his hands. The metal tags clinked softly together. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Dr. Kim entered carrying a small device. I thought you should see this, she said, placing it on the table between them. It projected a holographic display, showing a global map dotted with thousands of points of light. Each light represents a memorial service for Bomi happening right now. There are over 10,000 of them worldwide. Tae-ho stared at the display, unable to speak. When you agreed to share your story online, you created something powerful, Dr. Kim continued. People saw themselves in your relationship with Bomi, the healing, the unconditional love. When the visitors took her, they didn't just take a dog. They took a symbol of what makes us human. Tae-ho finally found his voice. So this mission isn't just about making contact. No, Dr. Kim confirmed. It's about showing them who we are. All of us. The ship rumbled beneath them, a deep vibration that seemed to resonate in Tae-ho's bones. We launch in 2 hours, Dr. Kim said, standing to leave. The UN Secretary-General will address the crew before departure. Get some rest if you can. But rest was impossible. Tae-ho found himself wandering the corridors of Leviathan, memorizing its layout and speaking with crew members. Many showed him pictures of their own pets, sharing stories of companionship that crossed language and cultural barriers. Finally, the call came for all personnel to secure for departure. Tae-ho took his place on the bridge, strapping into a chair beside Commander Lee. You ready for this? Lee asked. Tae-ho touched the collar in his pocket. No, but I'm going anyway. Above them, massive hydraulic systems began to move. The cavern ceiling, which Tae-ho had assumed was solid ice, separated along an invisible seam. Water poured in from the edges, a controlled flood that would eventually fill the entire space. The ship was built here for a reason, Commander Lee explained. We'll rise through the water and emerge from beneath the ice shelf. No conventional launch facility could accommodate something this size. As water engulfed the vessel, Leviathan systems fully activated. The hum of power intensified, and strange symbols illuminated along the walls. Propulsion systems online, reported the engineering officer. Structural integrity at 100%. All systems nominal. Commander Lee nodded and addressed the bridge crew. Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to make history. Our mission is contact, not conflict. Remember why we're here. He turned to Taeho. Colonel Park, would you like to say anything before we begin? Taeho hadn't prepared any words, but as he looked around at the faces watching him, people from different nations, backgrounds, and beliefs, he knew what needed to be said. We go not just for Bomi, he stated simply. We go for what? She represents the connection between different souls. Let's show our visitors what that really means. Commander Lee nodded and turned to the helm. Take us up. The ancient warship, Earth's greatest secret and last defense, began to rise through the Antarctic waters, carrying with it humanity's message to the stars. Leviathan broke through the Antarctic ice sheet with surprising grace, water cascading off its massive hull like a waterfall. For a moment, the colossal ship hung suspended above the waves, droplets catching the polar sunlight before it rose fully into the air. The crew felt the subtle shift as the vessel's gravity systems engaged, creating a stable environment despite their impossible ascent. On the bridge, Commander Lee checked systems while Taeho stood silently at the tactical station, Bomi's collar clasped in his hand. The elderly colonel had spent decades in military aircraft, but nothing had prepared him for this sensation. The steady rise without engine noise, the complete absence of vibration. All systems nominal, reported Chief Engineer Patel through the comms. Fusion drives operating at optimal capacity. Communications Officer Lee Sunmi, Commander Lee called. Begin broadcast of the diplomatic package on all frequencies. Sunmi nodded, her fingers moving across her console. Broadcasting now, sir. Message will repeat every 30 seconds until we receive response. The message was simple. A declaration of peaceful intent, a request for communication, and a clear statement that Earth considered the taking of Bomi an act that required explanation and redress. Colonel Park, Commander Lee said, turning to Taeho. The tracking station has pinpointed the alien vessel's trajectory. They're moving through the outer solar system, past Neptune. At our current velocity, intercept will occur in approximately 14 hours. Taeho nodded, studying the projected course displayed on the tactical screen. They're maintaining a consistent speed. They don't appear to be running. Or they don't know we can follow, suggested Navigator Choi, a young officer whose expertise in celestial mechanics had earned her a place on this historic mission. As Leviathan climbed higher, the blue of Earth's atmosphere gave way to the blackness of space. For many crew members, this was their first view of their home planet from orbit. A blue marble hanging in the void, suddenly precious and fragile. Record this moment, Taeho said quietly. People need to see what we're protecting. The next few hours passed in tense anticipation. The crew worked in shifts, monitoring systems, analyzing data, and preparing for various contact scenarios. In the mess hall, Taeho found himself surrounded by younger officers eager to hear his thoughts. What do you think they're like? Asked a junior science officer. The visitors who took Bomi? Taeho considered the question carefully. I think they're probably not so different from us. They made a mistake, maybe a cultural misunderstanding, but their technology suggests intelligence, planning. They're not monsters. They're just, different. With respect, sir, said another officer, they disintegrated your dog. That seems pretty monstrous to me. Taeho shook his head. When I was stationed in Afghanistan, I once saw a soldier shoot a goat that wandered into our camp. To the local herder, that animal was his livelihood, maybe even a companion. To the soldier, it was a potential security threat. Same action, completely different context. The conversation fell silent as the ship's intercom crackled to life. All hands to stations. We're detecting an energy signature matching the visitor craft. Intercept adjusted to 3 hours. Back on the bridge, Sunmi turned from her console with excitement. Sir, they've changed course. They're slowing down. They've detected us, Commander Lee concluded. Tactical? Any sign of weapons activation? Negative, sir, replied the tactical officer. Their energy signature remains consistent with propulsion, only. For the next 3 hours, Leviathan closed the distance between Earth and the visitor craft. Finally, on the main view screen, they could see it. A sleek, crystalline structure that seemed to bend light around its edges, making it difficult to focus on directly. They're beautiful, Sunmi whispered. Still no response to our broadcasts. The communications specialist reported. Wait, I'm detecting a signal. It's not on any of our standard frequencies. Run it through the translation matrix, ordered Commander Lee. Let's see if we can establish basic communication. Minutes stretched into an hour as the computers worked to decode the alien transmission. Meanwhile, Leviathan matched course and speed with the visitor craft, maintaining a respectful distance. Translation complete, announced Sunmi. It appears to be a question. On the screen, a single phrase appeared. Why follow? They don't understand, Tejo said. They have no idea why we've come all this way. Commander Lee turned to him. How do we explain the concept of a pet to a species that might not have them? Tejo thought for a moment, then stepped forward. Let me try something different. Permission to transmit an alternative message? With the commander's approval, Tejo worked with the communications team to compile a simple visual record. Images of himself with Bomi, hiking trails they'd explored together, moments from the dog's life. The last image showed Tejo alone on his porch, the empty space beside him where Bomi should have been. No words, Tejo explained. Just show them what they took. The transmission was sent. Minutes passed with no response. Then, suddenly, the alien vessel's energy signature changed. They're powering up something, the tactical officer warned. Defensive systems online. Wait, Tejo urged. Let's see what they're doing first. The crystalline ship began to emit a soft, pulsing light. Then a beam shot out, not toward Leviathan, but into the space between the two vessels. The energy coalesced into a three-dimensional image, a creature unlike anything they'd seen before, with multiple limbs and what appeared to be a translucent body. They're showing themselves, breathed Sunmi. This is first contact. The alien image gestured, then pointed to an empty space beside it. The meaning seemed clear. They too had experienced loss. They think they understand, Tejo said quietly. But they don't. Not yet. Before Commander Lee could respond, the tactical systems blared a warning. Multiple energy signatures had appeared at the edge of their sensor range, more alien vessels much larger than the scout they'd been following. We've got company, the tactical officer announced grimly. A lot of company. The crew of Leviathan watched in tense silence as the newcomers approached. Humanity's first interstellar hunt was about to become more complicated than anyone had imagined. The bridge of Leviathan fell silent as the massive alien ships surrounded them. What had begun as a pursuit had turned into something none of them had prepared for, a full diplomatic encounter. The main ship, at least 3 times larger than the scout vessel they'd been following, positioned itself directly ahead of them. Their weapon systems? Commander Lee asked quietly. The tactical officer shook her head. If they have any, they're not like anything in our database. I can't tell if we're being targeted or scanned. Tejo stood calmly, still holding Bomi's collar. After decades of military service, he recognized a crucial moment when he saw one. This wasn't about firepower anymore. This was about understanding. We came all this way for answers, he said. Let's not waste the opportunity. The communication system suddenly activated without prompting. The main screen filled with a cascade of images, strange landscapes, crystalline structures and creatures, similar to the one they'd seen earlier. The aliens were sharing glimpses of their world. Sunmi worked frantically at her station. They've adapted to our transmission format. They're learning our communication methods remarkably fast. The flow of images stopped on what appeared to be a group of the aliens surrounding smaller versions of themselves. The little ones were connected to the adults by thin, glowing strands of energy. Family units, perhaps? Suggested Dr. Kim. They're showing us their social structure. The next sequence shocked everyone on the bridge. It showed alien vessels approaching different worlds, and on each planet, creatures being released from containment fields. The aliens were documenting their visits to various planets. "They're liberators," Dr. Kim whispered as understanding dawned. "They think they're freeing captive beings." The final image was of Bomi, reconstructed from Earth's television broadcasts and internet data. The golden retriever appeared in a series of scenarios, on a leash in Taeho's home wearing a collar. Then came images of animals in far worse conditions, in tiny cages, neglected, abused. They couldn't tell the difference, Taeho realized aloud. They saw Bomi's collar and thought she was a prisoner being mistreated. Commander Lee turned to him. "They made a terrible mistake because they didn't understand our relationship with dogs." The communication system beeped again. This time, a single phrase appeared on screen. "Explain bond." "They want to understand," Sunmi said. "How do we explain something as complex as the relationship between humans and dogs?" Taeho stepped forward. "I think I know how." With Dr. Kim's help, Taeho prepared a response, not with words, but with brain scan data. Years earlier, as part of a PTSD treatment program, he had undergone functional MRI scans while looking at photos of Bomi. Those scans clearly showed the activation of his brain's emotional centers, the same regions that lit up when humans interacted with their loved ones. "Show them what happens in our brains when we're with our companions," he explained. "Science can explain what words can't." The data was transmitted along with footage of various people interacting with their pets. Guide dogs assisting the blind, therapy animals in hospitals, rescue dogs finding survivors in disaster zones, and everyday moments of companionship that spanned cultures worldwide. Hours passed as the aliens processed the information. The tension on Leviathan's bridge gradually transformed into cautious hope. Finally, a new transmission arrived, a complex 3D model showing the brain patterns of their own species, highlighting similarities to the human responses Taeho had shared. "They're showing us that they understand emotional bonds," Dr. Kim explained. "They have similar connections, just not with other species." The main alien vessel moved closer, extending what appeared to be a docking tunnel. The universal gesture was clear. They were inviting representatives aboard. "I should go," Taeho said simply. Commander Lee looked concerned. "We don't know if it's safe." "We've come too far to stop now," Taeho replied. "Besides, they could have destroyed us hours ago if that was their intention." Accompanied by Dr. Kim and 2 security officers, Taeho entered the connecting passage. The interior of the alien vessel defied human architecture. Spaces flowed organically, surfaces shimmered with light that seemed alive, and gravity shifted, subtly as they moved deeper inside. In the central chamber, 3 of the crystalline beings waited. Up close, Taeho could see that their bodies were composed of intricate structures that pulsed with internal light. They had no faces as humans would understand them, yet somehow conveyed attention and intelligence. One of the aliens stepped forward, extending a limb that held a small device. When activated, it projected a 3-dimensional image that took Taeho's breath away. It was Bomi, perfectly recreated down to the small white patch on her chest. "Is this?" he began, his voice failing him. Dr. Kim studied the readings on her handheld scanner. "It's not biological. It's some kind of energy pattern, but it contains data signatures that match the neural patterns of a dog's brain." The alien made a gesture and the Bomi image moved, wagging its tail and circling Taeho exactly as the real dog would have done. "They recorded her," Dr. Kim whispered. "Somehow they captured her neural patterns at the moment of..." She couldn't finish the sentence. Taeho knelt, extending his hand toward the energy pattern that contained the essence of his companion. The projection nuzzled against his fingers, and though he felt nothing physical, tears filled his eyes. The lead alien made a series of movements that their translators interpreted as a profound apology. Their people had believed they were freeing a captive being. Only after studying the data from Earth did they realize they had severed a symbiotic bond that benefited both species. As a gesture of remorse and reconciliation, they offered 2 gifts. The first was the energy pattern of Bomi, which could be housed in a containment field back on Earth, allowing a form of her consciousness to continue. The second was more significant: technical specifications for medical devices that could help both humans and animals live longer, healthier lives. You know, Tejo said, looking at the shimmering approximation of his dog. What happened was terrible, but because of it, we found each other across the stars. Because of Bomi, two intelligent species have a chance to understand each other. Before leaving the alien vessel, Tejo made one final request. He asked that they establish a permanent memorial at the coordinates where Bomi had been taken, a place where future visitors from either world could learn about the mistake that led to first contact and the understanding that followed. The aliens agreed. As Leviathan began its journey home, carrying its message of new alliance, the alien fleet deployed a small satellite in Earth orbit. It broadcast a continuous signal that any species could interpret, telling the story of how the death of one beloved dog led to a profound connection between two very different forms of life. And on quiet nights in Busan, when Tejo sat on his porch watching the stars, the energy pattern of Bomi still curled up beside him, a bridge between worlds that once seemed impossibly distant.